What is the scariest thing you've ever seen while driving at night?
Silent scan.
Someone I knew locally came across a Jeep that had just crashed into the ditch on a highway at night, flipped on its top, wheels still turning kind of thing. He was the first on scene, so called 911, and ran down into the ditch. The driver, who was badly mangled, had been tossed from the car and was dying. This guy held him, and the driver died in his arms. The weirdest part of it all was that he found out the next day that it was his cousin, but he hadn't been able to recognize him.
Silent scan.
A loving owl standing on the carcass of a large buck in the mountains at 3 to 5 am. All you see as you approach are two glowing red orbs, then slowly it becomes huge dark form standing on the edge of the road with eyes of fire. Then you get close enough and this massive loving owl just gives you the death stare as you go past. You realize it was just a large ass owl standing on the remains of fresh roadkill. Freaked me out for the rest of the dark part of the drive.
Silent scan.
I was on I-70 in Colorado going towards Utah, pulled over at a gas station at 8 p.m. Fueling up, I noticed a couple of attractive women pumping gas. On the other side of the pump was the man in his late 40s, just staring at these young women without notice of anything else going on around him. I walk inside to go grab some food for the next few hours of driving. When I come out, I see both the younger women's car and the older man's truck are gone. I decided to hang out at the gas station for the next hour to catch a little sleep before hitting the road again. After driving for a few hours, I was speeding heavy. I pull over at yet another gas station. The young women are there getting gas and eating some food on a picnic table. Looked like they had been there for a while. I didn't see any sign or the man in the truck, but can't say I was looking very hard for it. Well, here is where it got creepy as hell. Can't say I didn't stare at them a bit. I mean, they were good looking women. As I'm watching them leave, I see in the next parking lot over some headlights turn on, and it's the same man as before. He leaves when the women leave once again. Okay, that's a bit weird, but could just be a coincidence as there weren't many places to pull over. I leave a few minutes later and catch up to them. Now this guy's riding their ass with his high beams on. I decided to slow down and stay a distance behind the truck. 10 minutes or so later, the women pull over once again to most likely get this guy off their ass. With a sign of relief, the truck keeps going and I continue on my way. About 1 mile down the road, the guy just pulls off to the side of the highway. So I pull off a mile or so down the road again. Sure enough, the women drive by and the guy is still following them. At this point we are out in the middle of nowhere and too many coincidences have happened. I called the cops to alert them, and about 15 minutes the cops pulled the guy over. I could have just seen too many horror movies that started like this and overreacted, but yeah, I never know. Better safe than sorry.
Silent scan.
I used to deliver pizza and often had deliveries right at midnight when we closed. One time, late at night, I'm driving back to the store through a small neighborhood. Up ahead I see something. It's perfectly spherical, bright / shiny thing, just hovering about 6 feet off the ground. Not moving at all. I pull up very slowly. Still doesn't move. Still can't comprehend what I'm looking at. Just this shiny hovering orb in the road at midnight. At this point my curiosity has overridden my fear. I'm the guy in the horror movie who dies first, because I just gotta know. Either I die, or I get a cool story, right? So I hop out of the car and slowly walk up to it. I'm right in front of it and still can't understand what I'm seeing. So I reach out and touch it. It's a balloon. One of those foil birthday balloons with the street lights shining on it, making it look weird out of context in the middle of the night on an empty road.
Silent scan.
Frogs. Freaking everywhere. Like hundreds of frogs all over the road. Damn it, Moses.
Silent scan.
3 am on a lonely road, and I was the passenger. An old man only wearing a bra, panties and high heels was casually walking down the road. My friend who was driving didn't believe me and went back around. Sure enough, he saw him, and we were like, WTF. Gotta pay the bills somehow.
Silent scan.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to get even more awesome content. Come on, it just takes 1 second.
Silent scan.
I drove taxi during the night shift, and among many crazy and terrifying things, I saw a toddler, 3 years. It was about 1 AM, and I was driving in a very wooded part of our town, just after dropping a customer off, and in the middle of the road was this baby just sitting in the dark. I stopped my cab and turned on my flashers. I proceeded to walk up to the kid and he just started bawling. I tried to comfort him, but me being in disbelief that a baby with no one around was just sitting there, all I could say was it's cool bro. I picked him up and he started crying frantically. I would too if a stranger came and grabbed me. I put him in the passenger seat and looked for the nearest driveway. It ended up being about 100 yards down the street. I pulled up into what I hoped was his house, and there was maybe 6 or 7 teenagers drinking in the garage. I couldn't see from the road because all the houses had long dirt driveways. When I pulled up they acted as if I wasn't even there until I said, "Hey, this your kid?" After a few whats? They came over to the cab and said, "Aiden, where did you go?" Like the baby just goes for midnight strolls. Not a thank you or goodbye or anything. They just took the baby in the house and continued drinking and laughing. As I pulled out I felt as if I should call the cops or something, but couldn't bring myself to do it. I'm still scared to this day that I'll be driving down a dark road and hit a baby.
Silent scan.
Not at night, but at 4 o'clock in the morning when it was pitch black. I was driving to my college orientation by myself, and I was still a rather inexperienced driver when it came to driving outside of my county. I took the wrong exit on an interstate, and my GPS told me to follow the road that it let me out on for 2 miles to make a U-turn at the roundabout. It's pitch black, and I'm driving down this narrow road in the middle of woods. Nothing but trees on either side. There are no cars on the road but me, and I was thinking about how spooky it was, but I always blast my music so I don't get paranoid about that shit. I go around a curve and instantly have to slam on the brakes and swerve to avoid a giant piece of metal blocking only my lane. I crossed the double yellow, but I could see nobody was coming, and I did it safely. Shaken up, I kept driving towards the roundabout. It was about another minute. I turn around, still scared about what just happened, and I know to slow down in case there's a car in my lane going around the object on my way back. As I approach the spot, with absolutely no cars in sight and nothing but trees around the road, I see a man in a black hoodie and black pants hunched next to the piece of metal in the road, like he was rearranging it in a better spot. I floored it and went 60 down that tiny road until I found the interstate again and got back on.
Silent scan.
Dude burst out of the woods completely naked and made noise beyond screaming. We were driving maybe 35 km/h at the time due to us just coming round a bend in the dark, and we see this figure staring out of the woods on the driver's side of the road. Headlights hit this man but naked, covered in what appeared to be blood, and they caught his eyes in that reflective freaky state. The noise that came out of his mouth could be called a scream, but that would not do it justice. The most ungodly thing I have ever heard, and considering we were in a car with all the windows up, it must have been obscenely loud, because it was like it could have been coming from inside the car. This was in '96, and I still have dreams where he runs out from somewhere dark and makes that sound to this day.
Silent scan.
I was 16 when Jeepers Creepers came out. I lived in a little town out in the country in Tennessee. We went to the theater to see a late showing one night, and I was already a little spooked when I was driving home alone afterwards. My house was off of a highway that had a section that was pretty empty, and when I got that spot, I saw the creeper on the side of the road. No joke, he was standing there, and he spread out his wings, and I drove my car into the ditch. Turns out it was actually the town crazy guy that had wandered out of his house with a blanket wrapped around him. I just sat there in that ditch trying to calm down for a while before I could gather myself to finish driving home.
Silent scan.
I'm a fireman. Got a call at 01304 for reports of a vehicle on the side of the road flipped over. We arrived on scene and immediately saw the vehicle on its side. We then performed a couple 360s and couldn't find a driver anywhere. About 10 seconds later I hear our backseat today that he found him. I could tell by the sound in his voice that it wasn't good. When I walked over there, the kid's face had been smashed in half straight down the middle by the A-frame in his car. So the left half of his face was a little cut but intact, but his head on the right side was completely caved in. When I saw pictures of the kid, he was 20. Afterwards in the news, I didn't even recognize him.
Silent scan.
I saw a person in a long coat and a large brim hat step out in front of my car on the highway. At the time the best description I could give was he looked like Vampire Hunter D. I screeched to halt, and he was gone. My sleeping friends woke up scared and were pissed off at me. They made me pull off at a gas station and drink a 5-hour energy and they never believed me, but I was so sure I saw it. I guess that's my only ghost sighting story too, because I still don't think it was a hallucination, but I can't explain it otherwise.
Silent scan.
Not my story but my sister's. This was years ago. She was probably in her mid-20s and was a bartender. Naturally, she got out of work around 1 AM and was driving home. As she's driving by this cemetery, one of those giant, really nice and really well kept cemeteries, a woman runs out into the middle of the road with blood pouring from some unseen injury on her head. Like this woman is covered in blood. My sister stops and cracks the window a teeny tiny bit because she's thinking that she's about to get jumped and kidnapped. The woman is incoherently asking for help and freaking out. My sister is absolutely terrified at this point, but calls 911. She never gets out of the car. Police, fire, and EMT show up and treat the lady. The woman legitimately was just taking a stroll in the cemetery at night, fell and hit her head pretty badly, and flagged down whoever was passing by. The woman was fine, and obviously it was legitimate and thankfully didn't go the way of human trafficking, but my sister says it was still one of the scariest things that's ever happened to her.
Silent scan.
There's a lot of deer in my town despite living in a fairly suburban area, and near my house is a large stretch of private wooded land in the middle of town. It's not uncommon for there to be dead animals run over along this stretch of land. One afternoon, while on my way to work, I see that one of the city deer was hit and killed on the side of the road. It's happened before, so I just drive on. The deer stayed there for a few days. A few nights later, I'm having dinner at my boyfriend's house. I ended up staying late and finally went home sometime between midnight and 1 AM. It's completely dark out, and I'm driving past this stretch of private land when all of a sudden in my lights I see a loving balloon floating on the side of the road. Now this wasn't during the clonepocalypse, but my immediate thought was Stephen King level clown bullshit. Scared me half to death, until I realized that someone had tied a get well soon balloon onto that dead deer.
Silent scan.
An old woman in a low to the ground car drove into the underside of a big truck and died instantly. Drove past it on the way home one night and could see pieces and residue of her in multiple places. Part of her arm was stuck to the seat belt.
Silent scan.
A balloon floating in the road and next to a very old cemetery. Not super late at night. Around 10 PM. Hit balloon, looked back, still was right there. Scared my older brother and I.
Silent scan.
The police.
Silent scan.
Congratulations, you reached the end of this awesome video. Now, like and subscribe, like we talked earlier, come on.
Silent scan.